my guest today is an associate with ESPN Films, 30 for 30 podcasts, ESPN original content, and SEC Storied. More on that in just a second. He has worked in a number of roles, including associate producer, archival coordinator, editor, production assistant, and archival producer. In that most recent role, he helped create the latest for the Sports Emmy-nominated series, SEC Storied. This latest documentary tells the story of Tennessee Volunteers men's basketball legend Chris Lofton. The documentary, we can go and pull it up here, is called Volunteer for Life, directed by Sean Silva. It premieres Monday night, March 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time, and tells the story of Chris Lofton, his career, and his late career battle with cancer. So without further ado, let's go and bring on the man who was an integral part in creating this documentary. Would you please welcome Anthony Salas, who is joining the show. Anthony, I appreciate you coming on, my man. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I appreciate it. We're near the weekend, so I'm doing pretty good.
Oh, 100%. No, we're recording this on Thursday, so this show will probably be airing Sunday or Monday, so the audience obviously will be able to go straight from this and maybe hopefully watch this documentary on the SEC Network. So you've worked in a number of 30 for 30 documentaries in the past. I've got the list here. Dream On, which talks about, the women's basketball team, Team USA back in the 90s. You talk about the great Heisman race of 1997. One of my personal favorites, even as a Steelers fan, is Bullies of Baltimore. I thought that was as fun a documentary, start to finish, as I've seen. But as I mentioned before, you're an archival producer on this new SEC Storied, Volunteer for Life, tells the story of Chris Lofton. What goes into how does the discussion start? Like, hey, this is a player, this is an athlete, we want to tell his story. It's obviously unique, but a guy who was and we'll talk about more, but a college basketball superstar, a legitimate superstar, who obviously had these health concerns later in his career. Talk about what went into sort of the inspiration for that.
Yeah, well, we have a great deal with the SEC, thanks to our network, SEC Network. And one of the things that we've been doing for the past I don't know how many years, essentially trying to find those great SEC stories. And the thing is I believe this, as well as some other stuff that's, came out and been around the pike, has floated around these ideas for a while. So a lot of things that go into the timing of, okay, let's tell this story, can come down to things like budget, when is the money available, and that sort of thing, trying to figure out where stuff can go around a release slate. So for Chris Lofton, we're looking at, one of the pinnacle times, if not the pinnacle time for, Tennessee men's basketball. They were going on perennial growth for the tournament, right? And leading that charge was Chris Lofton. And you have this guy who was sort of under-recruited, he came out, grew up in Kentucky, wanted to go to Kentucky. They didn't even look at him. He had dreams of wanting to play for the Wildcats. And, Bruce Pearl just took a chance and ended up with one of the most dedicated and hardworking guys that they had in the program. And his leadership really came about when it came to his secret battle that he had with cancer that most people didn't know about until years later at times. So the idea originally came about from one of our senior ESPN writers, Chris Lowe. He was very tight with the team, very close with the team, and he helped us develop and figure out what the story really is going to be, and plays a central part in it. There's a very high-stakes moment that I will allow everyone else to figure out on next Monday night, or tonight, whenever this airs. Right? And really what we do when it comes to SEC Storied, 30 for 30 films in general, is like we want to dive past the sports, really. So when we look at Chris Lofton or any of our subjects, Boys of Baltimore or whatever, it's like, what is deeper behind this. With Bullies of Baltimore, it's framed, the opening sort of sequences, about Tony Saragusa and his passing, right? So you're trying to connect the audience with these things on a deeper level. Me personally, I've had family members pass, with cancer. Most people have known someone that either has cancer or has passed from it. So not only was this a wonderful story for me in terms of it being a homie story, it's about the Vols. I grew up in Kingsport, an hour and a half away. So, but being able to give hope and tell a story of that sort of perseverance and trial through various adversities, and being able to sort of uplift yourself and succeed in your own ways outside of that.
Well, that's one thing I'll bring up too, is that ESPN over the years has done a remarkable job about raising. I think everybody knows about the V Foundation, the work that they've done over the years. Seeing Dick Vitale most recently come back from his long battle with cancer, back to calling college basketball games, which is just fantastic. But obviously, I actually wore my Vols hoodie today for the occasion. I had to represent, but. Obviously, I'm a Vols fan. You're a Vols fan. So we know who Chris Lofton is. We kind of know the story. But just to give the average viewer context about how good this guy was, we can put up this graphic about what he was. He averaged about 16 a game. Again, keep in mind, this is a guy who was 6'1", 6'1" guard, 45% from the field, shot 42% from three-point range, 84 from the line. But you see the accomplishments. 3-time first-team All-SEC, a 2-time second-team All-American, and most recently, a couple of years ago, he actually got his number retired by Tennessee, rightfully so. And if anyone still doesn't believe us how good this guy was, well, we can show you probably the defining moment of Chris Lofton's career. We'll take you back December 23rd, 2006, in a matchup against Texas, and see if maybe if you're watching, you can recognize this future NBA legend who Chris Lofton hits a go-ahead shot over.
Lofton directing traffic. Durant out to guard him. Look at this long-range shot. Oh, he got it! I can't believe he hit that! Tennessee with the lead!
That's just kind of who he was, right? Big heart, hit clutch shots. Obviously, we showed you the numbers. Elite shooter, and there's no question about that. But we sort of fast forward till the end of that season and sort of that sequence where he does run into the trials and the adversity, as you bring up. No one aside from Bruce Pearl, at the time the head coach of the Vols, now the head coach at Auburn, his parents, a select few number of people, his teammates really, Anthony, did not know about what was going on. How does this all sort of, without giving away too many spoilers, how does this all sort of come to fruition in Chris Lofton's journey?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the big dilemmas, right? Is like, there's this whole situation of let me figure out how to sort of frame around this.
Take your time, no worries.
Yeah, there's this whole situation on like Chris's illness, and sort of, because it started off, he started to feel fine, and then it's just like test came back, and then next thing you know, they were weighing the options of what it could be, because if you know Chris Lofton, if you know how highly Bruce Pearl talks about him and what his reputation was at the time, it's like, this test can't be true. So they did some investigating, and it came down to a few options and of what the test actually could be, and it ended up being cancer. And Chris made the decision really early on, like with the medical staff and Bruce and his family's like, I don't want this to be a distraction. I don't want this to be some sort of campaign. I don't want this to be, taking away anything from the job that it is that we have to do. And in doing so, I mean, yeah, no one knew outside of a handful of people until an ESPN article after his senior year came out about this, which was written by Chris Lowe. So, I mean, the film dives a little deeper into how that all came about, the decisions that were going into that process, some of the dilemmas that the team had to face, and some journalistic questions that came about. But one of the things that you see is core to who Chris is and was as a Vol is that determination to fight through anything. Like you were saying earlier, I mean, he was 6'1", he's undersized. He's a guy who was overlooked, and now in the face of one of the most dreadful and biggest fights that anyone may have to deal with, he's now taking it upon himself to take the extra load of doing practices, playing games, trying to play at that elite high level when your body is eating itself, out. So it's just really a core testament to who Chris is and sort of what he means as a Vol for everyone that's in the film and what people have to, the positive light that people have to say about him. And thankfully, well-deserved, he had his number retired not too long ago.
No question. 100%. I mean, he's without question one of the greatest players. And I mean, when people think about Tennessee basketball, they tend to gravitate towards the women's side, obviously, and rightfully so. The late, great Pat Summitt, what she did. Candace Parker, who actually, I believe, was interviewed for this documentary. You see her in the trailer. Love Candace Parker. So were you guys able to interview Chris Lofton? Were you able to get him in to ask him questions for this documentary? Was he himself a focal point in terms of answering questions?
Oh, yeah, 100%. For any of our films, especially SEC Storied, when films are very much focused on a particular subject, not necessarily saying per se a biopic, but when you're dealing with something like SEC Storied and you're focused on a conference, you're trying to find these kind of minute stories that you can expand and give a new light into. And a lot of times the focus comes with access. Right. So Chris is a very part of the film. He sat down, we interviewed him in Thompson Bowling Arena. Wow. So it was a wonderful interview, wonderful footage. He was grateful and graceful with his time. But yeah, access and subject participation is key. We're currently going through something with another film where essentially that participation is hinging on what's going to occur with the process of the film. So, and one of the it can vary in this process as well, because like I'm working on our Stuart Scott film. So it's like awesome. you're dealing with someone who has passed, right? And so how you are able to structure and tell a story from a subject who is still living versus someone who has unfortunately passed on is definitely unique in each way and presents challenges and viewpoints in other ways. So Chris was a big part. We were able to get Candace Parker in as well. Bruce is in the film. There's some local writers that were a part of the film. Chris Lowe's in the film. So yeah, it's very much a Tennessee story, which is something that I'm very, very happy about.
Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.